Hi, everybody. This is Laura, Head of Social at CareerFoundry. First off, I just want to welcome everyone to another CareerFoundry event. And I'm just going to introduce myself for any of you who are probably 1 2 seconds late. I'm Laura, like I said, Head of Social at CareerFoundry. And today we have a wonderful presentation by our colleague, Video Team Lead at CareerFoundry, Callum Russell, on the 5 video best practices for social media marketing. Did I say it right?
You got it right. I got it wrong in my stories promoting this event, but let's skip over that.
Okay, perfect. Tricky title, but great presentation. So first off, we'd love to hear where everyone is joining from. So if you can just type on the public chat on the right-hand side, tell us where you're joining from. We'd love to see that. First off, just a little bit about CareerFoundry before I give Callum the floor. CareerFoundry is the online school for your career change into tech. We guide you from complete beginner to job-ready professional in digital marketing and a variety of fields to help you land your first job in the field, aka your dream job. Our programs are 100% online and flexible, which means you don't need to quit your day job to change your career. And you get regular one-on-one mentorship from not one but two industry experts who are a mentor and a tutor, both experts in the field, so they'll really be able to guide you as you career change into digital marketing. And if you don't land a job within 180 days of graduation, we refund your tuition. So if you'd like to find out more, please check out the links in the description. And if all that sounds like something that you're looking for, hop on a call with a program advisor with the link in the chat or shoot us a message. Now, before we kick off the webinar, I'd like to introduce our speaker today, of course. Callum is the video team lead at CareerFoundry and the mastermind behind CareerFoundry's fantastic YouTube video content. With over 3 years in video content marketing and a successful stint at AJ and Smart, he boosted their YouTube subscribers to 155,000 followers. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
In a very short period of time. You'll be able to ask him more during the Q&A. But yeah, just to sum it up, Callum is leading now our YouTube channel for CareerFoundries. He's building our YouTube presence and creating amazing videos for brand awareness and lead generation, which I'm sure you have probably seen already. So with that, let's begin. Callum, the floor is yours. I'll disappear into the background.
Cool. Thank you very much for the introduction, Laura. So as Laura mentioned, I think she covered pretty much everything already, but I can quickly recap because I had the slide made, so I may as well. So my name's Callum. I'm the video team lead here at CareerFoundry. I've been working in video in various marketing capacities for about 4 years now. As Laura mentioned, my speciality is focused on YouTube and scaling YouTube channels. But I've also planned and produced work for all the major social media platforms in recent years, predominantly LinkedIn and Instagram as well. So to give you a bit of background on my professional career so far, I had a previous role in a company called AJ and Smart. So AJ and Smart is a product design consultancy based in Berlin. And I was brought in about 4 years ago, which incidentally was the very start of my career, to work on their YouTube channel and produce lots of social media video content for their various channels. So I worked at AJ and Smart for around 2 years before I joined CareerFoundry. And at CareerFoundry, I now lead the in-house video team here, principally focused on YouTube. We also have a video element in the creative team that do all the in-house video content that we require. But I focus more on the kind of organic social media facing video content. So that's kind of why we've fashioned this event today, specifically around more organic and social media video content. So yeah, the idea at CareerFoundry is we can turn the YouTube channel into more or less an effective marketing pillar. So for acquiring leads and improving brand awareness in the platform, among many other things. So that's just a bit about myself and my background. I'll address the elephant in the room, but I actually broke my glasses recently. So I'm wearing old glasses that don't have that kind of lens reflective sheen to them. So yeah, it's a bit weird having this reflection in my glasses, but I just thought I'd point it out. I'm aware of it. Let's just make it work. So moving on, what are we actually covering in this event and who's it ideally for? So this event will be great if you're thinking of getting involved in digital marketing. Maybe you're thinking of a career change into digital marketing. Maybe you're already starting your career in digital marketing and want to get a bit more of an oversight of some video best practices. Maybe you're working with a creative team or a video team to kind of roll out social media content. All of the above are fine, of course. I should mention as well that digital marketing is quite a broad spectrum. So there's many different roles in digital marketing. And if I think of the marketing team here at CareerFoundry, we have sales staff, there's copywriters, there's video editors, there's SEO specialists, and social media managers, to name just a few of the roles. So the video elements that we'll be focusing on in this video and the best practices will be for more kind of, I say, good old-fashioned organic video content with social media platforms and social media publishing in mind. So on to my next slide. So just before we start, I thought it's always quite good to frame the discussion that we're about to have and some of the points I'll make with some statistics relating to video. So according to this report by Wisel, which I think is affiliated with HubSpot, 91% of businesses use video as a marketing tool in 2023. So when you think about it, that's actually a staggering amount of businesses globally and a lot of video content that are leveraging video and social media for their marketing purposes. And that statistic's also at an all-time high since Wisel started publishing these stats back in 2016. The highest proportion of marketers, I think it's around 97% they reported, continue to value video as an important part of their marketing strategies. And 71% of those marketers also created social media videos in 2022. That's either directly or indirectly. You, as a digital marketer, you might not necessarily be producing the videos yourself, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. But let's just keep that in mind and those statistics in mind when we're framing this kind of conversation as we go through the event. And as Laura mentioned, in this event, I'll be sharing my 5 best practices for creating social media focused video content. I'll try and provide a breakdown of why I think these practices are important, as well as some of the key points to consider when you're creating video. And towards the end of the event, we'll have a quick Q&A session where I can take any questions you might have about video at CareerFoundry or what video is like to work in video or create video content for social media. Specifically, I'll be looking at captioning, looping content, exclusive versus repurposed content, B-roll and additional content, and timing. So I'd say it's fairly platform agnostic. It's quite general and broad, focusing on organic video content. There's 1 or 2 slightly more technical video elements, but I'll cover those as they come up. But before we dive into the best practices and we kick off with practice number 1, I kind of want to hear from you. So I can see in the chat here in big marker, people checking in from all over the globe. It's really cool to see people from Toronto, from Norway, from the Netherlands, from the US, Berlin as well. It's really cool to see. But just have a think as well before we kick off. What kind of accounts do you follow? What kind of brands and creators do you follow on social media, and why? And what is it about their content that stands out to you? What kind of patterns can you identify with what they're doing? So maybe you can share your favorite video producers and social media accounts in the chat. I can check in on those, and we can start a bit of a discussion around that. But also keep it coming with the geographic locations as well. I'm always keen to see where people are tuning in from. So on to best practice number 1. Let's dive straight in and cover captions. I should mention, I've only been working in video for about 4 years. And when I first started, captions were way less prevalent than they are today. I think it's important to mention that captions and subtitling are now a baseline for successful video content. So you can think of captions perhaps in 2 overlapping layers. I like to look at it this way. One layer is accessibility and usability, and the other is kind of as a creative engagement tool. So in terms of the accessibility and usability, accurately captioning your content helps people with, for example, hearing impairments or who are non-native speakers in the language that you're producing content in, have a visual cue to draw from. So hopefully it means that more people can access your content, engage with it, and get the general gist of what the content is about. It also helps cut through accents. You might have noticed I tend to talk a little bit quickly and I have a Scottish accent. So particularly with video, I think it's usually helpful if you have some kind of closed captions to help that in terms of accessibility. And the second element I mentioned, and I will touch on this later in the event, is engagement. So videos that have captions, particularly with bold, blocky, colored text, typically help the viewer to engage more accurately with the content and what's going on. And it can really draw the eye in as well. If you think about the content that you see on social media, if you're scrolling through, Instagram or TikTok, or maybe you're on LinkedIn, things that kind of pop out to you are kind of bold and colorful. And that's a kind of creative way that you can actually leverage captions in your video content. So I would say Captions, I put it as number one because I feel it's definitely the most important, and it's definitely become much more prevalent in recent years in the video, digital marketing, social media industry. An example of this that I think is really effective to draw on is this creator, Ali Abdal. Perhaps you're familiar with Ali's content. He's, I hate to say it, sounds a little bit cheesy, but he sort of builds himself more as a kind of productivity and workflow kind of guru. He's got some great content. He's based out of the UK, I believe. He's really blown up in a lot of channels. He's massive on YouTube. I think he has well over 3 million subscribers now on YouTube. But I think for me, this video was meant to be playing as well. Unfortunately, it's frozen. But for me, Ali is like the gold standard of someone that leverages captions both creatively as part of their design aesthetic for creating content online, but also from an accessibility point of view as well. He has these big blocky text, but they're kind of incorporated into animations. So I think they're really engaging and they're very easy to understand and follow his content online. And his content's also really fun. His videos are really fun. I think he has a great team in place, and they're experimenting all the time with different video capture techniques and such. I will say that these captions, if you do go down the kind of more creative route as well, they're a little bit more complex and time-consuming to implement. Typically, they would require maybe editing software, animation software, but there are a number of tools that I'll touch on in a moment or two that allow you to do that and open up video to captions. A couple of the tools that just off the top of my head would be Descript. I've got that listed here. Adobe have some captioning capabilities built into their editing suites now. But if you don't have any experience with editing suites or videography or anything like that, or animation, that's not an issue at all. There's also tools like Veed.io and I believe Riverside FM, where you can caption your videos in a kind of fun, engaging manner, but still make them accessible and open to people. Yeah, so as I mentioned here, there's an example of Descript. I've personally used Descript a lot. I'm somewhat of a Descript evangelist, I would say. It's a brilliant tool. It's really fun to use. And particularly if you're thinking of starting out in digital marketing and maybe video seems a little bit daunting, Descript is a great tool because you can record something on your phone, drop the footage into Descript, and it will generate a transcript. And then you kind of edit your video like a word processor. You can delete chunks of text. That will delete the footage from the video. And then you can reposition and cut and paste as you would in a word processor or a Google Doc. And it alters and updates the video accordingly. Veed, I haven't actually used myself, but I've heard very good things from some creators that I'm friends with. So I think, yeah, I can also vouch for that one. So that brings us to the end of the first best practice, which is captioning. Moving on to looping. So now this is something that you're probably a little bit familiar with if you've spent any time on Instagram or TikTok, but it is looping content. I think, again, just to reiterate, this is a fairly new thing that's developed on the social media scene within the last couple of years. But for example, have you ever noticed if you land on a video on TikTok or Instagram, for example, it will just play over and over and over again? So the reason that they do that, I think this feature that these tools have brought out is to increase the watch time on the video content. And the idea is if you're watching something over and over again, say 2 or 3 times, you're probably enjoying that content. And that's good for these social media platforms. They are able to leverage ad revenue off the back of that watch time. And it's also good for creators as well. It tends to mean that if you create content that people watch over and over again, you'll get elevated and your content will be promoted much more dramatically by the platform. And that brings me back to the looping. So what is a looping video? You've probably got a good idea if you spent any time on social media, but a looping video is effectively just a simple piece of content or video content that loops over and over again. If it's looped effectively, the content will automatically kind of restart or loop in a fairly seamless manner. And I'll mention a creator in a short moment that I think is really effective with this. But as I mentioned, looping kind of engages the viewer for longer periods of time. It increases the watch time overall of your channel or your platform, and it creates a more engaging video experience. So if you're getting started with video or you want to leverage video for your team or your organization, I would definitely take a little bit of time and think about how you can create some looping content, as it's a bit of a game changer in terms of growth. And I think it really just boils down to being a little bit more strategic and a little bit more careful with the scripting. If you're planning some video content, if you can think about how you can kind of link it back to the start of the argument or the statement that you're making, it's a great way to get people to engage with your content. So what does that look like in practice? Well, I think people that I've seen using looping on social media platforms well tend to do it in a kind of question and answer way. So someone will usually propose a question and that will be answered, but then it'll tie back to this kind of final statement that ties into the question. It's kind of like an ongoing cycle of question and answering. So it can be done really well and quite cleverly if you look into some creators that are doing that. And it also works well for kind of role-playing scenarios. So someone that would ask a question, perhaps they're taking on the role of a junior in a particular field or industry, and you have someone that's a senior, and usually it's the same person. They're just doing like this little role-play scenario with themselves. I think it works really well for that, and you can convey a lot of important, valuable information in that manner as well. But typically the last line should set up the first one once it's looped, if it's done properly. And I definitely recommend maybe playing around with some like scripting with that and testing it out on your colleagues to see if it sounds natural and engaging. But it should be fun. You should have fun with it. It shouldn't be too complex. And I think just getting started is the best way to approach that, rather than focusing too much on the copy, for example. So if you're looking for a masterclass in looping content, you can perhaps open Instagram if you've got your phone to hand, and check out this guy here, Jamie Brindle. Now, I first discovered Jamie maybe about 2 years ago. I think I was on just on the Discover feed on Instagram, and his content really jumped out. It was the first time I'd seen this kind of effective looping content, and he is a great example of someone that can leverage this kind of role-playing scenario to great effect. So in his videos, he takes on the role of a junior, talking to a senior and asking questions about the industry. His particular niche is focusing on freelancing and business development. And it's just really engaging stuff. Like the senior character that he plays is kind of slightly more sort of frustrated or exasperated at times and always has this kind of obvious answer. And the more junior character is kind of inquisitive and eager to learn and a bit unsure of himself. And I think he carries it off to great effect. So if you want a masterclass in looping content, I would definitely check out Jamie Brindle's Instagram. Moving on, I've got my next best practice, which is exclusivity. Now, this is maybe a bit of a misnomer on my part. This could have maybe been titled slightly better. I don't want you to think that this is creating exclusive content for particular groups of people. That's not at all what I was intending. But this is actually focusing on exclusive content for platforms. And I'd maybe preface that with like a little versus. So it's exclusive content for platforms versus maybe repurposing content. So yeah. I think it's great practice in general to make video content for social media. If you're working in digital marketing or you're commissioning the video, it's great to always consider the platform you're publishing on. So typically at CareerFoundry, a lot of the videos that we've published, typically we find on social media that the most impactful content, the content that resonates the most with our audience is always content that we've made specifically with that platform in mind. So maybe to give a quick analogy, if you can think of the content that you might post on LinkedIn, for example, if you're working in digital marketing or maybe even for your own accounts, the content that you would publish on LinkedIn would be very different to the type of video content you'd post on TikTok, for example. There's different mechanics and different structures and different kind of attention-grabbing little tactics that you want to implement. So it would look very different. And we typically do a wide range of content at CareerFoundry. We do events like this where we'll chop them up and repurpose them on social platforms. Such as YouTube and YouTube Shorts or LinkedIn or Instagram, hopefully soon TikTok as well. And we'll also take the more kind of organic exclusive approach where we'll film natively with our phone, capture the content and publish it on said platform. So I think that works quite well. You can kind of notice in our content, some of the production quality, for example, tends to be slightly different if we're capturing from an event or if we're filming more exclusively for that platform in mind. But of course, you can distribute that content across various different channels and different styles. Just keep in mind that there is an exclusive element for almost every platform in question that you want to consider when making that content. So here's the example I mentioned. So on the left here, you can see some video footage that we shot with Maureen. That was just captured on an iPhone. So that was captured for YouTube Shorts and Reels on Instagram. And then in the middle, you can see a screen grab from I think it's a YouTube short as well. That was actually taken from an event with Alex the Analyst that we hosted on our events portal. So yeah, Alex, you can see slight differences in the quality of the production. We took a kind of slightly grainy webcam image and blew that up, but the salient points are still the same, and hopefully the value is as rich for the audience as we intended. And then on the right, it's kind of where the lines are starting to get a little bit blurred. We took some footage from an event, but repurposed it with a nice graphic and a little waveform. A waveform is just like a graphic representation of audio, and we published that on our Instagram. So there's lots of different ways you can approach this content. I wouldn't say any one way is particularly right or wrong, but just find out what your audience resonates with, find out what works for you in terms of your workflows and the way that you work with your teams. It will look very different for the different organizations that you'll work in digital marketing. And I can just see some people here commenting in the chat and Big Marker. Ashley's mentioned Xander Whitehurst, the Tech Corn, Jesse Showalter. Yeah, these are all people that I think do great jobs with their content, particularly Xander. I think Xander's blown up massively on his Instagram with these really super fast reels that he does relating to Figma. So yeah, really good shout outs there. Now this is the next slide here, looking at Gary Vee. So I think just to touch back on what I said there about kind of exclusive and repurposed content, I know this character, Gary, really divides the room. Some people love him, some people not so much. But as a content creator and as a video enthusiast, I think Gary and his team do a fantastic job of covering everything that I've just mentioned. So they do a really good job with filming fresh, exclusive, organic content. And they do a fantastic job. They built a fantastic mechanism and machine for taking content from his talks, his presentations, and repurposing that on social media. So you can see a real mix in kind of the quality and the production and the styles, but it all kind of comes together into this cohesive kind of content media strategy. And incidentally, he's also published a really nice PDF, if you check it out. It's kind of around how to repurpose this content. So I think it's the idea or the gist behind it is repurposing 64 pieces of individual content from something as simple as a tweet or a video. So it's really effective, and particularly if you're getting started working in digital marketing, and it's particularly video and media and content publishing, I can definitely recommend that PDF. I think if you just search for Gary Vee 64 pieces of content, it should come up and you should get the PDF. It's all free. But that's a really good benchmark for, I think, what a lot of teams aspire for. So on to best practice number 4, and we're making quite quick progress through all this, but I'm happy to take any questions as well as they come up. I'll have a quick scan of the chat and Big Marker as well as I'm progressing. But this is the penultimate best practice, and that is additional footage. So this practice focuses maybe a little bit more on the kind of the technical video side than the other practices that I've mentioned. But this is about you capturing additional footage, and more commonly known as B-roll. So B-roll is typically footage is not necessarily linked to the speaker, but it sort of highlights and reinforces the storytelling element. So say, for example, I'm describing to you, the viewer, how to draw a UX wireframe. It would be pretty bland and pretty unengaging if I just sort of sat and spoke to you in the video and the camera never cut away. But if you actually showed some additional footage of me drawing the B-roll and explaining the process and drawing out the rectangles and the shapes, it would be much more engaging for the viewer and probably reinforce the learning experience as well. So that's something to think of when you're making content, particularly video content for social media. Someone sitting around in front of a camera, whether it's a high fancy production setup or just an iPhone, it's not that engaging if nothing really happens on screen for 20, 30, 40 seconds, let alone 5-10 minutes. So always think about what you can kind of capture to reinforce your story, to help the viewer understand a concept or an instruction, and kind of factor that into your planning as well when making social media video content. Typically, you can either film the content required with your team, with perhaps you have access to a video team, perhaps you're doing it yourself with a camera. You can usually do it yourself, but I would encourage you to kind of build that into the planning process when it comes to creating content. If worse comes to it, you can always leverage a stock footage provider. Usually that jumps out like a sore thumb, though. Typically, stock footage is very very cheesy and a little bit awkward to incorporate into your videos, but it does work, and we've definitely used some of it at CareerFoundry from time to time as well. So yeah, that's always something to consider, is adding in B-roll and additional footage. And some examples of that, I mentioned the UX wireframing example, but you can see that on the right here. This is a short vertical video that we filmed with one of our alumni, Maureen. She's in quite a lot of her videos over on our YouTube channel. But in this short, we just wanted to show Maureen explaining how to draw a wireframe in less than a minute. So we wanted to go for this kind of engaging, snappy piece of content, piece of video content. But we also kind of wanted to show what she was doing. So it was as simple as filming the intro with the phone, where she explains the kind of setup, and then we just over the shoulder filmed her drawing on a piece of paper. And it took about 2 minutes to edit together in a basic piece of editing software. And there we go. You know, you have an example that you're kind of showing the viewer, and you're engaging more with them. And the same with the example on the left here. So Maureen sharing her favorite UX tools. We simply just stood over Maureen's shoulder and filmed what she was looking at on her laptop, and she could show the tools. So that's something to consider when you're factoring in more in the planning stage, what you want to capture, what you want to show. Maybe something's a bit more complex to explain. Maybe there's an easier way to explain that, and maybe that's just showing people with some additional footage. And I think some points to kind of remember when you're doing this as well is just think about what will be interesting to the viewer. Think about how you can engage the viewer further. And I would always recommend working in video for 4 years, capturing slightly more than you'll need. But yeah, you want to factor that into your workflow. You always want to capture a little bit more than you think you'll need, but be realistic. You don't want to capture loads of footage that you'll never use. And it should, with this additional footage, it should help tell a story, not distract from one. I think that's always important. Sometimes you go on YouTube and you'll see big productions and these long form videos where there's a cut every 2 or 3 seconds or every second, and they'll be jumping to different camera angles. I'm not suggesting that, particularly when starting out. Perhaps you're building a company's Instagram, for example. You probably also want to consider the tone of voice and the branding aesthetics as well that your company will aspire to. So don't go too crazy with that, but it is a good way to kind of convey a deeper meaning and more information. And on to my last best practice, or best tactic perhaps, and this is timing. And I would say with this one, there's maybe a slightly a double meaning to this. And it's maybe a slightly odd one to include because one, I don't really have any visual examples, so I'll just kind of talk my way through it. But this is to make, I would definitely recommend the main thing with timing is never make your content longer than it needs to be. That's the main message I want to kind of reiterate here. Try to deliver value with what you're producing in terms of video and social media content, and try to intrigue people up front. So content ultimately should be fun and engaging to watch, and it should offer some kind of value to the viewer. Try to kind of boil your points down when you're planning the content with your team or with your video team down into concise statements until the message kind of fits. And people are much more likely to engage with and share shorter videos over extended or longer form content that we found, at least. So if you can boil something that would normally take 15 minutes to explain down to 1 minute, that's a real skill, and I think that's definitely something you want to try and develop as you start your career with video and social media marketing. And I'm sure you're well aware as well, but there's a lot of creators and a lot of channels and a lot of brands producing noise into the internet these days, but you really are fighting for attention. So I think you need to kind of optimize your content for the platform that you're publishing on, and that kind of ties back into the practice I mentioned with the exclusivity versus repurposing. And for example, you know, as I said, the video content you publish on TikTok will be very different to the content you publish on LinkedIn, and it's just the state of affairs, and you kind of have to optimize for that and take that into consideration. But it shouldn't be a barrier. It should still be fun to create for maybe slightly more serious professional accounts or platforms like LinkedIn. And consider the pacing of your content as well. As I mentioned with the B-roll, you don't want to have cuts every second. It can be a bit overwhelming for the viewer, especially if you're trying to convey some complex information. So consider the pacing. Maybe you can provide some value up front or some kind of behind the scenes blooper or a joke. Leave that in, you know, you could have that front loaded and it will kind of hook people in, make them a bit more engaged with the content. and ultimately watch for longer, hopefully. And lastly, on the timing topic, think about ways that you can maybe document or showcase what creators are doing to your creative teams or your video teams. You as a digital marketer and as a social media, with a social media and video focus, a lot of videographers and editors won't necessarily be able to read minds. So I think if you can document and build maybe a small mood board of examples that you can share, that will stand you in good stead. And particularly think about the top creators that are working on these platforms and how you could apply what they do and the tactics and methodologies that they use to your own kind of brand and niche as well. And lastly, I would just mention, iterate on what works well and consider dropping techniques that don't pretty fast. I think if it hasn't worked for you after 5 or 6 videos, it's probably not going to work going forward. So yeah, just be kind of brutal, but yeah, incorporate that into your workflows and iterate as you go. So I think that takes me to my last couple of slides. I'm just going to double check the time. We've been going for about 30 minutes now. So in terms of next steps, I had some pointers that I would encourage you to maybe consider. If you've enjoyed the webinar, maybe you've got an interest in video and social media, I would encourage you to consider these next steps. As I just mentioned with the timing element there, I would definitely encourage you as a marketer to create a mood board. So you can access free tools like Miro or FigJam or Notion, but have a kind of repository for content that you find engaging. One little sort of tactic I do is if I'm on Instagram and I see content that I think could be applied to what we do at CareerFoundry, or maybe inspire the team in some way, I save it, and occasionally I'll post that content in Slack. I'll share it with the team. We also have regular workshops where we showcase what we find inspiring on the internet and on these social media platforms as well. So I think that's something that's really good to set up. And you can do that before you even, join a team or start developing this. I think it's always good to have a repository of things that you find inspiring or creative materials that you find interesting and be able to kind of tell people why as well. And you can maybe do that with some friends or some peers as well. I think it's good to have a sharing element to that to spark ideas and kind of creativity in that sense. Number 2, in terms of the next steps, I would definitely recommend as a digital marketer, generally speaking, but particularly on social media and with video, keep up to date with the latest platform-specific developments. So that covers things like video lengths, captions, picture-in-picture. The video technology on these social media platforms moves very, very quickly. I've only been doing this career with video work and marketing for about 4 years, as I mentioned. And yeah, the way that people produce content and publish content is very different now than it was even 4 years ago. So it tends to move quickly and keep abreast of the developments in the industry, and you'll go far as a marketer. And lastly, I would just encourage you to focus on stories and not sales. Now, I realize this is maybe a bit of a weird thing to say in a kind of marketing context, but I think trying to avoid having an overtly salesy or business focus with the video content that you produce, and more generally the social media content that you produce, will stand you in good stead. I think if you can come on, and typically some brands or organizations that I've seen can be quite corporate and cold, and it really just feels a bit awkward and it doesn't really fit with the kind of the vibe of the platform if you're on Instagram or YouTube Shorts or TikTok or even LinkedIn, although maybe on LinkedIn it's a little bit more at home there. But consider this when you're developing your video marketing strategies. Like, how do you want to convey your brand? How do you want to convey your message in a way that feels natural and fun for people? And just consider that when you're going into these things. I mean, it is a creative role as well, fundamentally, and you want to kind of engage human beings at the end of the day, not machines. So I think consider that and take it on board, and you'll be in good stead. And lastly, I just want to share some resources. So before we go into the Q&A section at the end of the event, I want to share some resources. I don't actually have links embedded here, but I can maybe just go over them. I've got the Later blog, so I can definitely recommend Later. They cover everything to do with social media. It's actually a tool that you can use for scheduling, but their blog and the resources that they have on their blog are incredible. So if you check out Later, or later.com, sorry, and go to their blog, you can see really detailed articles and videos and tutorials and tactics that you can use when you're starting out in digital marketing in your social media role. Equally, CareerFoundry have a fantastic set of articles around digital marketing, more generally speaking. So I definitely check out the CareerFoundry blog. You can go to our website and just find the blog that way. But they have a whole section dedicated to digital marketing and all the different areas and roles within digital marketing. And lastly, I would recommend Hootsuite as well. So if you're interested in staying up to date with trends, Hootsuite publish a really comprehensive trend report. I drew on some of that, as I mentioned earlier in the early slides, with the wise owl, I think it's pronounced. Oh no, sorry, they were affiliated more with HubSpot, not Hootsuite. But Hootsuite have their own trends report that I downloaded as well today, which is fantastic, and it covers all aspects of creative media, video, copywriting, articles, everything. And it gives you really very kind of data-driven breakdowns of where the industry is going. So I can recommend the Hootsuite blog and their trends report for 2023. But that kind of brings me to an end of the presentation. I hope you've enjoyed it. I realize I've been talking quite quickly as I progress through this, but hopefully some of these best practices have stuck with you, and you can leverage them when you start to develop your own role focusing on social media and video and digital marketing. But I'll maybe invite Laura back in now. But yeah, thank you for listening, and I'm open to any questions you might have.
Hi, Callum. So it looks like everyone has been really enthusiastic about the webinar. I've seen a lot of emojis flying around on the screen while you were talking. So
yeah, I saw.
Yeah, good stuff. So first of all, like I said, thank you so much. This has been super informative so far, and we're receiving tons of questions that we're going to get to. But before I do that, I want to remind everyone that if you're interested in doing the digital marketing program with CareerFoundry, now is the perfect time to do so, because we're currently offering a New Year scholarship worth up to $8,245 or euros of the full price of our digital marketing program. So to claim, simply click on the sticky note on the right-hand side to book a call with the program advisor. Now, let's get on with the good stuff. Let's look at the questions that we have. First off, let's see. We have a very interesting question from Caroline. What are some creative ideas for making interesting B-roll when your team is remote and most of you don't share an office?
Oh, that's a really good question, and definitely something that we've had to consider at CareerFoundry from time to time. I would say the best piece of advice is just think about what you actually need. Like maybe you've got the base content first. Maybe you've recorded an interview remotely with your colleagues. Think about some interesting things that come up, or could maybe use a little bit more of a visual cue to explain. And then if possible, if you have a friend that can help film, I would honestly just recommend staging it in your home office environment. I think things like footage of people typing on keyboards is relatively easy to obtain. We just undertook a massive B-roll shoot at CareerFoundry where we had people working at desks and at home, kind of highlighting this home office environment. But I think a friend with a phone, or maybe even a tripod that you can set up and record yourself working, and yeah, some of your main actions, I think would be my tip for that.
Yeah, so if you have any questions about remote content creation, Callum has done it all.
It's aged me horribly.
Okay, another great question about B-roll. This one is from Ashley. Ashley asks, what do you think of reels that are mainly B-roll with no audio from the person on screen, but music is playing in the background, versus a reel with no music, but the person is speaking? Is one more effective than the other?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's not, to be honest, it's not something I've actually, in my experience so far, created myself, but I have seen these on social media. I think it falls into two camps. Typically, I think accounts or creators that want to grow very quickly will use things like trending audio and trending B-roll, perhaps. Right? So they'll have like an audio, like a speech or some kind of funny moment, and they'll have that over like some statics, or maybe you'll have someone that's a bit more serious and focused in the business sector that will have like a screenshot of a tweet, but it's actually a video and there'll be some background music. I think it depends on the purpose, right? I think they're still effective, and I know that platforms like Instagram really highlight reels and video content over static images now. So maybe if you want to say, for example, you're trying to grow your Instagram channel for your company or for your personal account, you can use this kind of combination of static images and repurpose it as a video. But I don't think it's particularly engaging. And I think definitely people speaking without music or sound effects is also fine. I think it depends on the niche or the content that you're covering, but maybe isn't as engaging. So I'd always encourage maybe some background music, and you have access to lots of music and Instagram and TikTok. But yeah, I would say, I don't know if that answers the question, but it's I would say it's maybe not as engaging as it could be if it's a sort of static with some music.
Yeah, no, I agree. They can always test that. I agree with you. It might depend on the audience, but definitely with music and a speaker, it's always, I find like more interesting. Another great question. If you could start over your career as a video content creator / YouTube specialist today, would you do anything differently?
No, I was going to make a really purely timed joke there, but no, I won't. What would I do differently if I was to start over today? Yeah, that's a good question. I think when I started out, I didn't really know what I was doing, if I'm honest. Like, I applied for this job and they gave me a trial, which worked out really well personality-wise and vibe-wise, but I really had to cut my teeth with the video production, and there's so many moving parts to it. You have the video production element, the creative element, and then you also have the distribution and the production on that side, and how you publish things and title them and thumbnails. So I would honestly say you could sit and just spend a solid week or two and just consume as much information as possible. So I think I would definitely do that. I would maybe focus less on the video and the technical element and more focus on the distribution and the production and distribution on that side of things. So things like titles, hooks, captions, hashtags, trending music and audio. I would really dive deep into that, because ultimately most people have a really good camera in their pocket, in their phone, and you can use that and you can leverage that to make content very quickly. And I think people kind of tune in for the entertainment factor and the value factor. They don't necessarily care what kind of brand of camera you're using, how expensive it was, which I maybe focused on this at the start, learning how to use these fancy cameras. So I would go deep on the distribution side and all the kind of production side on that account.
Okay. And on that note, regarding production, our next question is, what resources can you recommend for refining social media videos? So if you have like a top 5 or top 3, what would it be?
For refining video, sorry? How do you mean? Or
editing social media videos?
Yeah, as I mentioned in the presentation, I'm a huge fan of Descript. I think their tool, what they've built, is really clever. So if you're just starting out in terms of getting content out there, I would just record on your phone, bring it into Descript. It will transcribe it. You can edit it by deleting text like a word processor. Like, you can download it and publish it through Descript as well. And you also have the captions as well, which it provides. So I would definitely just recommend checking out Descript if you haven't already. I don't know if I have a list, to be honest. I would definitely, in terms of actual execution and production, I would say if you're just starting out and you don't really know how to use an editing suite, check out Descript. It's kind of like a one-stop shop for everything you might need.
Perfect. Now, regarding
Descript or anything as well. Look at the Descript logo in the background. Yeah.
We're not sponsoring Descript, but that's great. So in terms, I know we spoke already about the tools and we spoke about what is more important in terms of how to create great B-roll in a remote context. But in terms of moving on to growing an audience on YouTube, how long do you think it takes to build a good presence on YouTube? And what kind of number of subscribers would you say is a good presence? And what kind of, so this is a 3-part question, very ambitious from our viewer. Lastly, what kind of team do you need to make it happen? So how long to build a good presence? What number do you think is a good presence? And what should the team look like? Huge.
Okay, I might have to come back to you for the part 2 and 3, but in terms of, the first part was how to build a presence, is that right?
How long do you think it takes to build?
How long? Okay, so it depends on YouTube what you're doing. If your business or your organization or you as an individual are focusing on like long form content, I definitely think I would try and stick to, purely for consistency and data gathering purposes, 1 video a week, which is quite ambitious. It is a lot of work, and depending on your resources, it can take a bit of time. But I've also seen channels that have got, several 100,000 subscribers with, like 12 videos, 14 videos. So I think it really comes down to kind of what you're trying to do. Are you trying to grow a channel quickly, or are you trying to build an audience quickly? And then, as a sort of caveat to that question, would you say your audience values quality over quantity, or quantity over quality? And then maybe take that approach. That can kind of inform the amount of time you put into videos. Maybe it's you make one really good, valuable video a month, and say you get to like 10,000 subscribers from scratch within a couple of months, But yeah, it really depends on the amount of effort you're looking to put into it. Is my answer. It can happen for some people very quickly, and for others a bit longer. But I think ballpark, you can start to see some traction after a few months. But ideally, YouTube is a long-term play, so if you're looking at years over weeks, is what I would stress. Yeah, and the second part was
for you, what kind of numbers do you think represents a good presence on YouTube?
It depends how you define good presence. I think you can have 10,000 subscribers or like avid fans of what you do and consume your content and engage with it and promote you to other people. And you can have 200,000 that don't really tune in or turn up for the videos. So I don't necessarily see it as necessarily a size related question, but more of a kind of engagement related question. So I would say if you have a really engaged audience and you have people that turn up to your videos and drop into the comments and share your content with other people, that's much more valuable than 500,000 people that really don't care what you do week on, week out. So maybe I would try and reframe that mindset and focus more on the kind of engagement factor with the audience. But yeah,
I agree. Creating a dialogue sort of with your community, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess if you were looking to build a channel, so to grow a channel from scratch and to build a presence that has a good quality, also in terms of its audience, what kind of team would you need in place?
Again, this kind of comes down to maybe, I feel like I'm kind of giving half answers and there's always like a caveat or something, but I would say it really comes down to the resources that you have available. If you're a solo creator or solo individual looking to grow a YouTube channel, it's going to be all on you. You're going to have to do the research. You're going to have to do, maybe you're preparing scripts for your videos. You're going to have to film the videos. You're going to have to edit them. You'll publish them. You'll do thumbnails. So it's like a full stack kind of affair. But if you're working within an organization, perhaps you're in a digital marketing role and maybe the strategy is to gain more kind of organic leads and you want to start a YouTube channel to do that, I would say the 3 people that you ideally would have would be a videographer and editor. So someone that can film the content, make it look nice, think about the composition and the editing, as well as edit it and turn it around. I would also recommend, perhaps I would even say a copywriter, just so they can help really refine the messaging and the scripting if you're working with external talent. And what Gary Vee used to call it, this kind of art person. So someone to do the graphic design and create thumbnails, which should never be underestimated. I think, yeah, you should also spend a significant portion of that thinking about the thumbnail and the title and things. So I would say, yeah, videographer, editor, potentially a copywriter, and potentially a graphic designer. If you can get someone that can do all of that in one, great. They're few and far between. But yeah, that would be my core team, I would say.
Great. And in terms of staying ahead of the curve with the latest development, the latest rollouts, if you meet someone who wants to enter the field, what would you recommend so that they stay on trend, on top of the latest trends?
I think the resources that I mentioned in the last slide were quite good for stuff like that. Maybe more for kind of video and social media marketing, I would definitely recommend later.com. They're great. Also, just generally speaking, staying ahead of like what's going on in the kind of the tech and the digital marketing world. I mean, you can work in a digital marketing role and not be necessarily in the tech field, of course, but websites like The Verge as well, they have a lot of like up-to-date articles on technology and developments in the marketing world and what big companies are doing with their resources. So yeah, there's a lot of portals. Hootsuite I mentioned as well. Descript have a fantastic blog. The CareerFoundry blog is really good. A lot of really cool digital marketing articles there. And also in terms of solely focusing on video, I would recommend just seeing what your creators are doing. Like, what do you enjoy watching online and why? When I asked that question at the very start, it was to kind of elicit this thinking of like, okay, you can kind of replicate that. You can see what people are doing. You can see the tactics they're using. You can kind of replicate their style. I would never say, don't come across as inauthentic, keep it true to yourself, but see what other people are doing and try and take the best bits of that and incorporate it into your own content plan as well. And usually those creators are also ahead of the curve as well when it comes to, trying things out and experimenting with different production techniques or different developments on the platform as well. So.
Great. And in terms of, we have a great question here actually related to thumbnails.
Okay.
Briefly touched upon thumbnails, and this is a big one. How do you recommend someone designs thumbnails for videos that are both enticing but not too clickbaity?
Oh, it's always been my kind of philosophy with thumbnails. I mean, the fact that I even have a philosophy with thumbnails is maybe I'm too far down the rabbit hole now. But I always look at what people are creating online. So if you're making a video around UI design or something, you want to, what is UI design? I would start the process by looking at what's already online. So on a platform like YouTube, I would see what the thumbnails and titles are, and where I could improve on that. And it depends what your angle is. If you're trying to be discovered, or if you're focusing the content on searchability, you probably want to jump out from the crowd. So I mean, I could spend hours talking about color theory and diving into this and contrast and things, but I think the quickest thing to do is honestly just type into YouTube how to make a good YouTube thumbnail, and you'll have, I think the top 5 results that come up are from pretty renowned creators, and they kind of go into things like contrast and image selection, and there's a very human element to this. I know it sounds a little bit silly or frivolous perhaps with thumbnails and social media, but there's a real psychology going on behind the scenes. But yeah, just look at what some of the bigger creators are doing and search for that on YouTube, and you'll get some really good answers. And maybe it'll make you think in a slightly different way about thumbnails on social media.
Cool. And I actually like that you revealed that you have a philosophy on thumbnails, because it just
I don't know if that's probably yeah, maybe it's a rather grandiose statement, but
it shows the extent to which you are deep into YouTube and into content creation for social media, which not many companies have departments dedicated solely to YouTube, right? They usually have a videographer creating all types of content for the website, social media, Instagram, YouTube, one person doing everything. And I think what's interesting is that you specialize on YouTube and short form videos for social. So the next question is related to that in a way, because how would you convince a more old school / traditional business to go all in on YouTube and other social media platforms as marketing channels?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I should preface this with by saying, fortunately, I didn't have to do that. I think Ed, our CMO, is somewhat of a visionary when it comes to that as well. He definitely identified the need for CF to have a CareerFoundry, to have a YouTube channel and grow that out, which is very rare, I think, in marketing generally. I think the way I would approach it is maybe in terms of like organic traffic and looking at this kind of discoverability element. It's tricky because YouTube is I view it as such a long-term play. It's not something that you'll necessarily see impact within weeks or months, but maybe more over the course of several years if the company has a drive and a focus to do that. So I would definitely kind of pitch it as this is a strategy that will gain us, it will increase brand awareness and searchability and discoverability, as well as potentially open up a new source or pillar for lead generation. I would maybe pitch it as that, but with the caveat that it would probably take considerable time to start to see results on that. But there's no better time than the present to start, I guess. And it definitely compounds as we see. We have videos that came out 2 years ago that still deliver business impact for us, on our YouTube channel. So the quicker you can get them up, the quicker they'll start showing results for you.
True. And I think the searchability of YouTube, right? Because you can just look up a topic and you'll always find a video, even if it's 5 years old, which you can't really do with Instagram as easily.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is a big thing, and maybe why YouTube is such a favorite platform of mine, is that you can put your kind of heart and soul into kind of the creative video element, and people can still find that if it's optimized for search, or if it's performed well, people will still find that content years down the line. Whereas if you publish something on LinkedIn or maybe even like TikTok or Instagram, it tends to fall by the wayside quite quickly, particularly if it's not something that platform is focusing on at the time. And I know there's a big debate about Instagram and people wanting to use it as their personal kind of photo album, and they kind of resent the fact that Instagram only kind of promotes video content and reels, which I think is totally valid. But I don't necessarily think we have that issue with YouTube. I think it's a really good resource, and it compounds over time.
True. Now I'm going to take a couple last questions to be mindful of time. So the first one is a very popular question lately. So how do you see artificial intelligence playing a role in your work in the future or even now?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's a bit of a hot potato right now, isn't it? I think it definitely will impact some industries quite profoundly. And I watched this really good clip recently. I won't reference who posted it. I think it was a competitor of CareerFoundry's. But it was Don Norman, the sort of fabled UX designer, godfather of UX, and he was talking about how we should always remember with artificial intelligence and platforms like ChatGPT that it is just that. It is an artificial intelligence. That's the key word. It's artificial. And it really does lack that kind of human, slightly artistic nature to it. So these platforms will look for patterns and present you with what it thinks is a representation of that. And more often than not, people will have to either further tweak those tools or come in and change it altogether. So in terms of my industry and video and marketing, I think it'll be a bit depressing if we ever get to the point where we have to just sit and film with ChatGPT. I think there's always going to be a human element to video, and I think that's why I would say it's quite a future-proof role. That said, I do know that these like avatars that are AI generated that replicate human characters and talking heads and stuff. But I think they've not quite ironed out the uncanny valley nature of it all. So I think I'm personally not too worried about it, but get back to me in like 2 years' time.
As a follow-up to that, are you using ChatGPT in any way or not yet?
I played around with it briefly. Like I think I went up to the sign up page and then I had this kind of weird hesitation. I don't know. I have played around with it. I've watched a lot of videos on it. Sorry, but I've yet to kind of engage with it fully. But I've definitely, in terms of social media and marketing, I know I've seen a lot of creators leveraging artificial intelligence and ChatGPT to kind of generate titles or video scripts. And one of my colleagues came up with a really good analogy that it's kind of like having an intern at work. They're probably very eager to learn and produce lots of stuff for you, but you might want someone to check that before it goes out publicly. Like there's probably some fine tweaking and refinements to make. So I've not really personally played around with it, but I think it could be quite useful going forward to kind of automate more laborious tasks, perhaps, in what we do. Yeah.
Interesting. I think that's a great analogy. And I heard, don't quote me on it, but I heard that Google's coming out with a ChatGPT competitor soon. So
yeah, it had a really funky name as well. I can't remember what it was called. Yeah, it was quite cool.
Yeah, if anyone knows the name, drop it in the chat.
Drop the name in the chat. We want to know.
And last question, I think this is a great one. How do you see the mix of long-form content, short-form content, interviews, etc., on a YouTube strategy? Perhaps how do you see it on your YouTube strategy, and how do you suggest someone else takes this into account?
That's a good question. I think definitely YouTube as a platform are pushing short-form video content, primarily to kind of keep up with TikTok and Instagram, who are kind of dominating that role. I would say in terms of strategy, people still go to YouTube for long-form content. If you want to learn how to do something, you'd go to YouTube. You wouldn't necessarily go to Instagram Reels at this stage, at least. So I think YouTube will always be, hopefully, a long-form first platform. That said, I think they're also, they have like 2 billion monthly active users, and the second largest search engine in the world. So I think they'll have a real edge when it comes to shorts and short-form video because people can search for that and discover it. And they're really pushing shorts at the moment. They've also just monetized shorts for creators. So you can actually start leveraging your shorts in return for cash from AdSense on YouTube, which I don't think at present TikTok are doing. So it's very select. I think they have a small budget for that. So in terms of the strategy overall, I think it's important, but more as maybe an engagement tool for your audience as opposed to creating kind of sustained growth. I know a couple of big creators like Chris Do at the Future have shorts are great. They're very easy to produce, but it's the long form content that people still show up for and get the most value from. So yeah, I don't think it would necessarily impact what we're doing too much, but definitely keen to double down on what we have done with shorts and roll that out in 2023.
Cool. I wish I could get to all of the questions, but we're coming right to the end of our webinar. However, I just want to remind everyone to stay tuned. We'll have many more webinars coming up. And before we wrap up this fantastic webinar, I want to remind you of a couple of things. First, like I said before, if you're thinking of doing the digital marketing program with CareerFoundry, click on the sticky note on the right-hand side to book a call with a program advisor. You can ask our program advisor any questions about the curriculum, the program, what kind of jobs you can get with a digital marketing degree, and whether this is the right career path for you. We're currently offering a New Year scholarship worth up to $8,245 off the full price of the digital marketing program. So book a call to claim this offer. Second, stay tuned to our events page, our social media channels, and of course, our fantastic YouTube channel for more amazing content on digital marketing and all things tech and career change. There's lots of great content coming up and webinars as well, so stay tuned. Perhaps we'll have Callum again for another webinar. That would be fantastic. And last but not least, Callum, thank you so much for taking the time to present today. This was fun, informative. I love the questions. I love that people are so engaged with B-roll content, editing tools, reels, and artificial intelligence, of course. So
yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So this was fun, and I wish everyone a good evening or a good morning wherever you are, and we'll see you next